right. Therapy. So I'll just say that this is the beginning of the end for sure. As I'm recapping, I'm starting to notice that there are, times where like the emotional availability isn't there. I'm also noticing that, my ex at this point is, definitely out and about with friends a lot more and is less focused on our relationship, and is definitely avoiding this conversation about, kids and family as, we had initially agreed and discussed before we got married. So that plus my pup's death and kind of how that situation happened, right? I kind of was like, something's not right here. And I've already basically told him at this point that I'm thinking about divorce. And so off to couples therapy that we go because, I agree. Like, it's been well over a decade that we've been together at this point. Like, I really want to be able to say, like, we tried everything if it doesn't work out, right? So, yeah. Couples therapy, I remember the very first session, I will admit at this point, I was probably not a healthy person to be around for a lot of reasons. But, I remember the first session, I basically was like, I don't know why we're here. Like, I don't think couples therapy is really what we need. We had already discussed that Sean was going to do his own individual therapy, and he hasn't done that. Like, he did not follow through on the promise. And one of the things I should add at this point, the therapist that we're seeing, we had saw before we got married. So before we got married, we had met and did like maybe 6 months with this therapist, like really working on like communication and like, building a roadmap for us to, be stronger together. And so at the end of that relationship, right, that was one of the things that we had left off with her, is that we were both going to do our own individual therapy and continue to grow. Sean did not follow through on that. So we're coming back to the same therapist with this same history that she kind of knows both of us and kind of what has been going on in the relationship, right? And so I'm starting off this session with like, I don't know what we're doing, couples therapy again. He has not followed through on the promise that we had last time we were here with you, essentially. And so, it's already starting off like very contentious, right? And so to her credit, she really does a lot to help like calm me down and kind of like reintegrate both of us back into the relationship and trying to work on problems together. And I think we're able to work through the situation with the pup really well. However, there's this other piece of like the communication with the children piece and how I was completely blindsided about that switch and had no idea what was going on, and still to that point did not feel like I had a reasonable answer as to like why things had completely switched. And of course at this time I'm still like trying to filter out, because now he's saying that like 99% he does not want to have children to 1% that he might, and I'm kind of more close to, a 60-40 on the side that I do want children, right? And so we have a real big crisis there, right? Because that is very different lifestyles, right, that we're both wanting to live. And even still at this point, like, I'm not really understanding like the switch, like why it kind of felt like a light switch to me, in the sense that as soon as it became like time to like try and be ready for that, all of a sudden, he's out with friends, like he's, doing any and everything other than, being invested in our relationship. And I'm still confused, right? Even as we're kind of repairing some of these other things, like that still keeps coming to the forefront as like it's not resolved. And we have a clear crisis there that like this is not going to work unless I change, right? And so I compromise, right? Because he's so far on the other side. And to my credit, to his credit, I guess, like, he really like does a number to convince me that, like, no, we shouldn't have kids. Remember, all the stuff that you're worried about with society and, raising multicultural children, right? Like, it would really not be, benefit. And then he kind of brings in all this other stuff about like my weight and like not being healthy, and how my family, my parents and my grandparents have died young. He's just throwing all the stuff at me as far as like why like having kids would not be a good thing. And claims his greatest fear is that we have kids and I die young, and then he has to be a single dad and like navigate that alone. Like, he wants children with me, but not in that situation, and not in the society and all this other stuff. Okay, so I try my best. I convert as much as I can, but honestly, like, it's coming down to hard value for me. And the more that I try to close the door, the more I'm like, I don't think I would be okay with like not even trying for children. And like, I really thought that that's what we were building towards this whole time. That was like the conversations that we were having, right? And so it just felt really, really bizarre to me that all of a sudden the story was changing, and I felt like something else was going on. And little did I know, I was right.